Five, four, three, two, one. I'm John Miglosh with Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Okay. Well, today I want to talk about, this is really the core of the epistemarketing concept, that we can know things for sure, that we really can know. And if that's the case, it changes the marketing game. And this is not new. This is not new to some digital age that just got going here. This is something that's literally been around for 150 years. Claude Hopkins, in his book Scientific Advertising, which is available at scientificadvertising.com, points out that the science is settled. We know what evokes emotion. We know what evokes response. And the direct mailers in the last 50 years, now he's talking about from 1920. He's talking about back to 1870 and how they've been testing all the way through, and they know what works. And so he didn't have to invent it. And yet this has been lost. It's been lost to the millennial MBAs who were never taught anything about mail or anything about testing. So we're going to try to memorialize this in enough detail so that if I get hit by a bus, they'll have some guidance. And that's what epistemarketing is about. So let's dig in. Good morning out there. I see you. I'm transcribing this, which means that I have to pay attention and not make too many comments. Okay, now, right off, I would say in marketing, knowledge demands experiment. Now, that is a loaded statement because I come from an epistemological background. I have a master's in philosophy from Madison, and that is one of the more rigorous schools in the world. And how I managed that, I'm not exactly sure. I had a knack for it, let's just say. And so we're going to be talking about lots of testing methodologies and results, but not today. Today we're just laying the foundation. So it's not the case that all knowledge is scientific. There's logical inference, and there are intuitions, and there are things that seem to be known without clearly knowing how they're known. That's too high a test. But we have an area of knowledge, which empirical we'll call it, that's based on science. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can apply that. And one of the advantages of it is it's repeatable. And that becomes really, really important. I'm not saying that the ethical core of humanity through time is not repeatable. But we need something that's a little more systematic right now. Okay? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I would contend that direct marketing is about testing. It's not about measurement. That's a definition that's been bonked around, and I went head-to-head with Pete Hoke and with Bob Stone and with the authors of that definition, because I said, in fact, their definition is measurable. They don't even talk about measurement. And, you could measure, but you didn't. And I asked Bob Stone how he could have done that. And he said, we never dreamed that people would be able to measure and wouldn't, or would and wouldn't test. And the differentiating factor in testing is the isolation of causal variables. Testing isolates cause. What I mean by that is we boil it all down in the clutter, and we can see what's going on. And the marketers are now saying, the millennial marketers are saying, we A/B split all the time. Yeah, okay. That's you're on the right track. Think of A/B splits that are very carefully done. Because the other factor is testing with transactions. Transactions are another level of information in terms of consumer behavior. And so the direct mail industry, the mail order guys, the junk mailers, have tended toward bottom line ROI. They've been brutal with themselves because that's how you stay in business. That's how you make the most money. Okay? And the digital age has given us this impression that all data is equal, that clicks and persistence and bounce rate and they are related, but they're not the same. Engagement is not the same as purchase. So I contend that direct marketing is the key to making money with data. It's all about that. It's a science that's been perfected now over 250 years. And one of the great fathers of direct marketing said, direct marketing is the greatest weapon that's never really been tried. And I agree. In the 80s, everybody wanted to do direct marketing. It was before the internet and the digital. It was the rage. And we couldn't have enough classes. Everybody was coming. But so often, even those in direct mail never really set it up right. They never understood the experimental foundation. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, you have hard data. Everybody in e-commerce has some hard data. Okay, you sell something. Thank you for the hearts. And we're going to talk a little bit more in one of the next slides about transactions versus patterns. But in general, the world is settling for measurable. It's settling for trying to discern patterns in the movement of people across the internet or in their car and where they drive. And I'm not saying that can't show you things. There are things to be gleaned from that, but without a good dependent variable, without a good indication of need and want and purchase, it becomes an endless game chasing your tail, trying to sort through virtually infinite data. It's not infinite. I know it's not. But, first it was data-driven marketing. Then it was database marketing because we could pile it up more. Then it was big data. And now we've got AI is going to save you. Okay, well, if you don't know what you're doing with experimental design, all the data in the world is not going to help you. And I think I told you my GM story back about 2 weeks ago. Okay. Better data not only comes with transactions, but with setup. And every time I do this, my screen changes. Better data comes with setup. The way you design the experiment conditions the quality of data that comes out of it. And the textbooks are full of unintended interference in the experimental design. So what we're trying to get at is why people buy. We're not just trying to get at how they feel about your branding. That may be connected, it may not. And context, that other information, can multiply the values. But first we have to have this fundamental foundation. Another fallacy, we talk about real-time data. All data is historical, and this creates a problem. There's always a knowledge gap between the past and the future. No matter how much data you have, you will never have data from the future. And yet you have to make your offer. You have to launch the adventure into the future. That's what marketers do. I used to be intimidated because accounting people had all their numbers add up. And mine, were projections, and they never quite came true exactly the way I had hoped. Sometimes better, but sometimes worse. And I was always intimidated by the accounting people till I learned that accounting is basically sorting the piles in that already exist. It's driving in the rearview mirror, and there's no opportunity or very little opportunity in that exercise, unless your accountant is creative and looks toward the future and how we might change. But the future's never quite the same. no matter how much you work at it. There's never enough data to make a decision, because decisions are about what do we do next? Where do we go next? And all the data of the world will not tell you what's around the next corner. Not exactly. Got that? It's really important. And that's why we work so hard to isolate causal variables. That's the game. That's the game, because if they have causal force in the past, they may have causal force in the future. It won't affect everything. It won't cancel out great economic changes or competitive challenges or manufacturing or supplier, embargoes or tariffs. So here's a kind of a look at things, okay? This is data over here, and time past, time future. And the past is static, it's historical, it's accidental to some extent. And if all you do is capture what happened accidentally, then you have no insight into what actually caused customers to buy, okay? And we have data processing. But what it does give you is it gives you observation, okay? And it's the observation, the suspicion, that helps us create the test on a variable that we think matters. We're not going to go into all of the scientific method today. We may get there next week. But suffice it to say, you have a suspicion. You say, oh, people didn't buy because our price was too high. Let's do a price test. How do you do a price test? How do you set that up carefully? How do you set that up so that we'll really know the price sensitivity of a particular item? How do we know a price sensitivity of a category? And of course, it'll change. When the competitors catch on, they may react, they may add features, or they may lower their price. And, we can talk about some of those adventures also. But the future is dynamic, but it's also hypothetical. It's strategic, and it's really what marketing is about. Marketing is about opportunities in the future. How do we glean and harvest the marketing future? And for that, we got to come up with some hypotheses. But we got to come up with something that's testable in a meaningful way. And that's what we're talking about in this course. The first thing I want you to think about is sports. Sports, is a terrible metaphor for most things, but we don't think about it this way. In the average sports contest, we don't play two teams against different teams in different fields and decide who would have won head to head. We always go head to head, right? We play on the same day, under the same conditions, and we even change ends of the field regularly, right? Because the wind and the weather and the sun affect the play of the game. We all know it does. And so we switch ends, and we keep the field relatively level as best we can, so that both teams have a chance to demonstrate their competence and capability. This is the key to thinking about experimental data. We want to make the level playing field. So when we test, we don't just select samples even randomly. It's much better if we have strata of customers by quality and make sure that we're selecting within those categories randomly. Okay? There's techniques, and if you've taken statistics, you probably have some idea. It's not that hard, but you have to do enough. We don't play a game and just run it for the first 5 minutes. Even overtime now in the NFL has changed because they decided that a team going down and kicking a field goal, that's not a solid enough test. And so if all you do is go down the field and the other team stops you and you kick a field goal, the other team still gets the ball. They still get a chance. And I think that's right. In college they have head-to-head little skirmishes, and each team gets a chance. I think that one's kind of more fair, I'd have to say. But there's a big advantage to who goes first, because if they only get a field goal, then the other team doesn't have to try as hard. If they get a touchdown, then it's 4 downs. Never mind. Never mind the sports metaphors. The other idea, besides level playing field, is you have to make an offer and sell something. I feel fairly strongly about this. I wrote an article called "Did Direct Marketing Swing the Election?" It was about the 2016 election where Brad Parscale started selling hats and yard signs and things because they didn't really have the money to just willy-nilly spend it. And so they decided, well, maybe we could make a little money and test the waters. And so they started selling hats and they started selling bumper stickers and selling yard signs, which I had never seen before. And I'd been in politics for 40 or 50 years. We always gave that stuff away. And we always had leftovers. Couldn't give it away fast enough. And that was a big part of our expense. But Brad decided that politics was just like direct marketing and that he could apply direct marketing principles. I called his office and I asked the receptionist, "Do you ever hear the word direct marketing around here?" And she said, "Oh, direct marketing? That's all we talk about. That's in our DNA." That's what she said, honestly. It was a receptionist. I don't know. Anyway, so Brad decided to make an offer and sell something, and that gave him a better foundation of knowledge, knowing where to spend the TV ads, knowing which states were in play based on those sales. So transactional is superior to inferential. It's superior to where you came from, where you're going next, what your browser history is, what your cookies tell you, and even what products you looked at. That retargeting kind of works if I didn't really buy it already. But don't follow me around forever because I probably already bought it. So thinking about the value of transactional data, of selling something, is another key to getting the right data. So testing plus transactional data equals strategic explicit knowledge. That's really what direct marketing is about. But it's not a one-time thing. We have the observation, we make the offer, and then we go from the offer to the test, and then the test generates data, which tells us more things. It gives us more observation. And then we start again. And it's a continuous process. My mentor, Vic Hunter, said, always test something. And he was not kidding. We'll get into the what we test and what results we've seen next time. Knowledge demands experiment, especially in marketing. Thank you for joining me for Target Tuesday.